worked about 30 miles from my hometown, and I almost never happened to be home during the daytime unless some work-related matter brought me to the hometown during daytime. But that Wednesday morning was one of the very few exceptions. About 10 o'clock, my job-related matters were completed, and I decided to make a short stop at my home, though I didn't expect anybody to be there. The kids Lisa and Elmer ought to be in school, and my wife Monica used to spend 2 hours at the gym every Wednesday morning before she began her part-time job in a fashion shop at noon. Therefore, I had a slight surprise when there was a silver metallic Volvo V70 on my driveway. Monica had not told me about any visitor, and it was very unusual that she skipped her weekly gym hours. I can't deny that the V70 got me a bit curious, as it is the most common car here, and it didn't give me any clue about the ownership. Our car register is a national register, and information about a car owner is available by a cell phone. A text message of the plate was sent to the registrar, and a few seconds later the car owner's name and address was returned to the phone. The reply from the car registry got me even more curious because the owner of the car was the shop where Monica worked, Paris Fashion AB. The shop was run by Alina Alfredson, married to Eric Alfredson, both in their mid-40s. Eric was known for his climbing the ladder upward to increasing influence. I hardly knew both of them because I was never invited to any of their parties. What the hell did any or both of them were doing at my house at that time in the morning? If Lena was the visitor, it must be of a very important reason, and it was Eric. I began to fear that it could even be the worst possible crap because there have been some rumors about him, but I still had a strong hope of finding an innocent explanation about the visit. However, I decided to prepare for everything and made my cell phone 5-megapixel camera ready for action. Not that I expected to need it, but just in case. Then I sneaked into the house, nobody in the kitchen and nobody in the living room. Now my heart began to beat faster when I heard some muffled sounds from somewhere. The door to the master bedroom was closed, but with my ear close to the door I could hear a female voice, probably Monica. No time to lose. With a cell phone camera ready, I opened the door and took a step inside. Monica and Eric immediately noticed me. When I took some further steps towards the bed, aimed and took a picture using the small flash in the phone camera. After that, I rushed to the bed, gave Eric several hard hits in his face with both fists, dragged him to the floor, and gave him several hard kicks at his balls. Monica screamed hysterically, and I shouted at her to shut up. Eric did not any attempts to resist when I dragged him naked out of the house and threw him beside his car. I went back in for his clothes and threw them at him and shouted, "If you don't get your bum on my property within 30 seconds, I'll beat the crap out of you." I think he was gone within a far less time and doubted that he had dressed. Back in the house, I told Monica to get dressed, piss off, and not come back until tomorrow. I even told her that the children would spend the night with her parents and I would take them there after school. Before Monica left the house, she tried to tell me some mumbo-jumbo that it wasn't what it looked like and that I was her only love and so on. Once again, I shouted at her to shut up, and a few seconds later she obeyed and left. Now, afterwards, I can only remember that I must have had a very serious shock because when looking back at what happened during the first hours after discovering them was like being in a fog. However, I know for sure that I rang my job and told them the truth and promised to be back at work on Monday. After that, I rang Eric's wife and told her that I had found her husband naked in my bed, drilling my wife. I can still remember her swearing like an old harbor worker. Thereafter, I phoned for the largest garbage container to be placed on my lawn. The next step was taking out all Monica's clothes and her other private belongings to the garage. I even took out the few things she still had left of those things she had brought with her when we moved together, and even all those things she had got from her parents and other relatives during our marriage. Everything was piled on a plastic tarpaulin at the garage floor. Thereafter, I took my electric chainsaw and destroyed the rather expensive bed on which Monica had cheated on me. After that, I had begun to destroy all other furniture in the whole house, except in the children's rooms, which I didn't touch anything at all. When I got the container, I began to throw everything that remained in the cupboards into it and then filled it up with the broken furniture. It was an expensive loaded container, very expensive indeed. Monica had always preferred to buy things of good quality. Now I didn't care a shit about the value of the lost belongings because my lost marriage felt like a much worse loss for me. One of my friends owned a summer house near the town which his family seldom used. I called him, told what happened, and rented the house until I could find somewhere to live in the town where I worked. During my lunch break in town, I got our shared bank accounts and divided them into equal parts. When everything except my clothes and personal items was out, I began cleaning the house and in the evening began working in my still intact home office by loading a picture of Monica and Eric to my computer. It was a very good picture of them screwing in all different positions and both of them looking at the camera. No doubts about who the people in the photo are. I knew that T. Eric had several political goals at the local and county level, and one of them was to be a leader in his political party. Politicians usually want publicity, and now Eric got a lot of it because I emailed the picture of him screwing Monica to all the local politicians whose email address I was able to find. A text explaining who's drilling whom was added to the picture. I even printed out some pictures which I sent by mail to people without an email address. Monica rang me several times during the day. I took all her calls and told her every time that for the time being we had nothing to say to each other. To my great surprise, I didn't get the expected visit from the police. Obviously, Eric had not accused me about the beating I gave him. I slept the night in my son's room and can't deny that I got remorseful in the morning when I looked around the coastal areas in Europe. However, I thought that it was better to be an overreacting savage than a wanking idiot when a man found out that his wife cheated on him. When reading the morning newspaper, I found an interesting headline, "Naked Man in Car Crash." The article that followed said that a naked man had crashed his car into a garbage truck, and as he hadn't used the safe belt, he had got several injuries, though the airbags had saved him from the worst thing that could happen. One thing was for sure, nobody could accuse me for hitting his face, and the next thing for sure was that there would be more to come. Indeed, much more came in the newspapers about the scandal involving such an important politician. Monica came home at 10 o'clock in the morning and got a shock when she saw the container on our lawn and when she came into the almost empty house. She began screaming for several minutes before she was able to ask me, "What have you done?" I replied, "What have I done? What have you done? You terminated our marriage and I have cleaned up what remained of it. Your things are in the garage. Take it away before the house is sold." She screamed, "Do you know what happened to Eric, and do you know that I'm fired from my job? Don't blame me. Is it really my fault that Eric and you screwed up our marriage and your job?" She didn't reply. Instead of that, she walked around the house and screamed loudly when she understood the serious consequences of her cheating. Then she called the police and waited outside the house until the police car arrived. 2 young police women asked me if they could have looked in the house. I agreed, and they asked a few questions about Monica's belongings and spent a few minutes in the house and the garage. Before leaving, they told Monica that they were sorry for her, though my overreaction was an incredibly stupid thing, but it was not against the law. Monica cursed me and left our house. Our kids and Monica remained with her parents, and when I rang them the next day, I agreed to meet them for a negotiation because Monica refused to see me or talk with me. We met at a cafe, and because we could not change the past, we agreed to talk about the future. Because I had always liked Monica's parents very much, I told them the truth and that I intended to find an apartment close to my job. I wanted the kids to remain in their present-day school and close to their friends, and that was why I offered Monica custody. My only condition was that I wanted to see the kids every second weekend and for some special occasions after agreement plus shared holidays. Monica's parents agreed that it was important for the kids to have a good relationship with their father. They even promised to help Monica buy me out of the house. Because the negotiations had obviously been better for Monica than she had expected, she agreed to see me about details that needed to be worked out. I met her at the same cafe where I had met her parents, and as both of us understood that there was no way back, we didn't talk about that. Instead, we did our best to find solutions for the future. We agreed about the children, and she said that she and her parents were working on buying me out of the house. By using his connections, my boss found a well-located nice apartment for me where I could move in a month later. One of my Fridays without my kids, my fellow worker Anna invited me for dinner with her and her husband Rolf. I accepted, and to my great pleasure, they had even invited Rolf's newly divorced sister Elise. Elise was a rather beautiful and very easygoing woman, a few years younger than me. And we had a good time together during the evening. We even agreed to go for a shopping trip to the huge mall in our country's capital at the next morning. The trip went well, and Elise's 5-year-old daughter Lena and I became friends within no time. Elise and I decided to cook a dinner together at her place at the evening. The three of us had much fun during the cooking. While eating the dinner, Lena looked at me and asked, "Do you want to marry my mom?" I was taken by surprise and could hardly say no. And that was why I said I would like to do that. But your mom must think about it first. Lena looked at her mom and asked, "Are you thinking about it?" Elise gave both of us a bright smile and said, "Oh yes, I promise to think very much about it." Later in the evening, when Lena was sleeping in her room, Elise and I did some light necking in a sofa, and she said Lena really wants me to get married because her father is already living together with his new girlfriend, and you seem to be approved to be my husband in Lena's opinion. I kissed Elise and said that I would do my very best to keep my promise to Lena. I got a positive surprise when she offered me to stay overnight if I agreed to behave as a good guy. Though I didn't have a slightest clue about how else expected a good guy to behave, I agreed to be that. I decided to go on slowly until she would say no and stop there. I kissed her tenderly, put my hand under her hemline, and whispered in her ear, "It feels like we've been together a long time, and I've been in love with you the whole time." She giggled and replied, "Are you joking?" She didn't make any attempts to resist when I moved my hand higher up under her skirt, caressed her inner thighs, and said, "No, I'm serious. 100% serious." Now she looked me straight in my eyes and asked, "Serious or a simple attempt to get me laid?" "How shall I know? Believe me." She continued looking in my eyes and replied, "I do believe you and I care about you too, but isn't it a bit strange to say such things during our first date?" Now I hugged her with both arms and said, "I can't explain how it could happen so incredibly soon, but it did, and the truth is that I'm in love with you." She didn't resist when I began to undress her, but said that unprotected sex was out of the question, she wasn't on pills, and that she didn't expect me to come to our first date equipped with condoms. When both of us were naked, I took her to the bedroom and gave her the best time of her life. When she came, it was very intensive and wriggled back and forth. Back in the bed, she told me that her ex had never been able to do anything like that to her. Elise and I continued with necking and small talk for some time before we fell asleep. Since she feared that I would regard her as a cheap 304 and dump her, I had to do my very best to convince her that everything I had said about love was true. The next day, I took Elise and Lena to a famous inn for dinner, and it felt that we were a real family. Back at the job on Monday, I had many questions about the weekend, and obviously it was well visible to me that it had been a great weekend. Of course, Anna's dinner had been a set-up plan to lighten up an unhappy guy, and to everybody's surprise it had gone much better than they had expected. Eric Alfredson was dumped by his wife and by his friends in politics after the scandal. He left the town. Monica bought me out of our house. She got a new job at an office and is dating some guy she found on the web. I've never met him, but my kids said that they like him. I'm happy because Lisa and Elmer are very well together with Elise and Lena. Elise and I are planning for a wedding, and she's even talking about a baby. Our relationship is on a great level, and we are looking for a house in some nice area. The life used to be up and down for most people, but for the time being it is very much up for Elise, our kids, our ex, and me. Now for the second story. It was a sad day, indeed a very sad Friday for me. Within a few minutes, I would see if my life had turned into a mess out of my control. The only thing to do for the time being was to wait and see if the expected crap would really happen. However, I wasn't any poor idiot who would mourn and feel sorry for myself. No, I had never forgotten what my old sergeant once a long time ago taught me, that action is the best defense. My only choice was to fight for at least saving my honor, even if many other things went to hell. To my advantage, I received some information yesterday that gave me enough time to be well prepared for the events to come. That was the reason I was sitting in a friend's black Peugeot 307 parked in the discreet corner of the motel parking lot. I was told my wife would be here after lunch, and now it was nervously exciting to see if her red Toyota Yaris would arrive. She came and was followed a few seconds later by her real man in his extender BMW that he parked beside my wife's car. He said a few words to her and walked to the registration office. I left my car and walked to my wife's Toyota, opened the unlocked door on the passenger side, got in and sat down in the seat. My totally surprised wife screamed, "You Billy, what the hell are you doing here?" I gave her a brown envelope and said, "Not much, only giving divorce papers to my cheating soon-to-be ex-wife. Have a great time screwing your noble real man and feel free to stay here forever." She began screaming, "No, no, no, you are totally wrong. It is not what you think. Let me explain why I'm here, and I can promise you, it is not for any cheating. I demand a divorce and don't give a shit if you are screwing that worm that just ran away to get the room key to your love nest. Feel free to be as 304, and as I said, I don't give a shit." It was obvious that my once upon a time loving wife had expected this afternoon to be a much more romantic event with her obviously horny noble lover because she began to cry loudly. Now her so-called real man was coming back waving the room key, and when he saw Rebecca crying and still sitting in her car, he opened the door on her side and asked, "Who the hell is he and what has he done to you?" While he was saying that, I got out from the car, took up a small plastic bottle from my pocket, and while rushing over to him, I heard her son, "He is my husband, and he is going to get both of us divorced for doing this." The lover shouted, "I'll beat that stupid idea out of the damn creep." When the lover turned against me, I aimed at his face, squeezed the bottle containing a mix of water and shampoo, and the resulting water jet against his face and eyes blinded him and had him screaming with anger. While he was temporarily out of action, it was time for my second weapon, a dart with 3 flukes soldered to the head. I took a quick step getting behind him where I took a hard swing of my right hand and pushed the dart through his pants and underwear deep into his left bottom. Thanks to the barbed tip, it remained stuck and was impossible to withdraw without surgery. My actions were successful, so I left the now obviously unlucky lovers. He had shampoo in his eyes, a dart in his bum, and was sweating like an old harbor worker. My cheating wife was still sitting, loudly crying in her car seat. I rushed to my car and left the motel parking lot without any further problems. Whatever would happen later that Friday, one thing was for sure, those lovers would not be in the mood for any romantic sex. The beginning. I'm Billy Svensson, a 37 years old Scandinavian guy, for the time being married to 36 years old Rebecca. Our 2 children are Emil, 9, and Estelle, 7 years old. Rebecca and I have been together for 11 years and married during 10 years of that time. We have almost everything couples in our position are dreaming about, so we ought to be very happy, but I regret to say that we are not. In my humble opinion, the main reason for our unhappiness is Rebecca's mother. Though she is not green, doesn't have a tail, and doesn't spit fire, she must still be regarded as a genuinely hostile dragon who has never avoided any chance to be a pain in the back to me. That began the first time I met her. I was invited for dinner to Rebecca's home. It was more of a cross-examination than a pleasant dinner. After a lot of questions, the dragon said that she didn't like my name because Billy is a Y name, and she didn't like people with Y names. Upper-class families never gave their children such names as in Billy, Kenny, Ronnie, Molly, Nellie, Cindy, etc. Thanks for that, I thought. I was surprised when both Rebecca and her obviously spineless idiot of a father remained silent while I was humiliated by the dragon. She continued by saying that Svensson is a typical farmhand name from the days when a son got his father's first name together with son as his last name. Then she went on by saying that she had expected something better for Rebecca since her other daughter, Natalie, was going to marry a fine man from a noble family. I had heard enough, stood up and said, "Isn't that guy's father a creep in some distant branch of that family? And what is he, an unemployed parasite on the social welfare system?" Before somebody replied, I continued, "I need some fresh air. Are you coming with me, Rebecca?" To my great surprise, Rebecca came with me, and we left what I regarded as a dragon's nest. I knew Natalie's boyfriend Alexander from my school days and wasn't surprised that he, with his conning skills, had gotten Rebecca's weird mother to regard him as a God's gift to Natalie. That was not my business, and why should I care? Of course, I wasn't invited to Natalie and Alexander's big wedding and didn't care a shit about that either. What I cared about was Rebecca's and my relationship. And that grew better and better until it went too good, resulting in her accidental pregnancy. That got her dragon mother almost spitting fire when she rang me and shouted her opinions about the kind of scumbag I really was in hers and other decent people's opinions, and that any kind of wedding at her expense would be out of question. The Los Cristianos Scandinavian Church on the Spanish Canary Island Tenerife is a very popular place for small-scale weddings, so Rebecca and I went there with our best friend and got married. Both Rebecca and I found fine jobs in a town 210 kilometers away from our hometown, so I had minimal contact with her mother, who spent all her efforts and a lot of money on Natalie and Alexander. The next years were good for Rebecca and me and our 2 children. We made fair money, bought a nice house, and made many friends in our new hometown. Our sex life was still on a fair level. Thanks to the distance, I had minimal interactions with Rebecca's family because her parents never visited us and went back to our hometown. I saw my family and Rebecca went to hers. At last, even Alexander had enough of the dragon we shared as mother-in-law. To everybody's surprise, he had done well at his job and had gladly accepted a promotion that included a transfer to a new location 280 kilometers away. After some arguing with Natalie, he had given her a simple choice: accept the distance or get a divorce. She followed him to the new job. Now the dragon remembered that she had a daughter named Rebecca and began making daily phone calls. After a while, these somehow began to get Rebecca, without any real reason, acting chillier toward me. The calls centered on more nagging about what I did, had not done, or ought to do, and even more bullshit about how well everything had gone for Natalie and Alexander. Our relationship didn't get better when I told Rebecca that the main reason for Alexander moving away was to get a far distance from the hostile dragon who was his mother-in-law. One accident never comes alone, and Rebecca's feelings for me got even chillier when a new guy, also from some side branch of a noble family, began at her job. Rather soon, Rebecca began describing him as some kind of a superman, or at least a real man. He was married to a nurse, but his wife was in Tanzania, Africa, volunteering as a nurse at some medical aid center and still had about 3 months left on her tour. The real man and his wife intended to buy a house when she was back, but in the meantime, he was living in our town, renting a room at his wife's married sister's house. Rebecca got me really fed up when she compared my doings, my vocabulary, and even my clothes with that real man at her job. There's no need to say who the winner ended up being in those comparisons. Though Rebecca and I still had sex, my attempts were often met with comments such as, "Now again," and "Don't you ever get enough?" If it hadn't been for our children and for Rebecca's many good sides, I would have dumped her a long time ago. But she was obviously faithful, a good mother, keen with cooking, kept herself in nice shape, and we worked well together, keeping the house clean and a nice garden. If she had not started her nagging and all her other sour comments to me, she would still have been my dream wife. Of course, I was an idiot who took all her crap without telling her my opinion, too. That increased our problems, just like one evening after our children were sleeping. Rebecca said, "I really wish you could be more like my coworker. If you are in love with that cunning faggot, why don't you file for divorce and be free to be his 304? But as long as we are married, I will never accept any cheating. Screw that a hole behind my back, and be sure that I will teach him that though you may act as a cheap 304, your services will have a high price tag." Rebecca began screaming hysterically, "You simple scumbucket. What in the hell did you just say about me? How dare you call me a whore? Be sure that you will pay for that. Isn't it better that your customers have to pay?" I shouted back. Before she could make a nasty reply, 2 scared and crying children came to us, and I began doing my best to calm them down. 2 very chilly weeks followed after her outburst. The first weekend, she and our children went to see her parents, and then the next weekend, when Natalie and Alexander came to see us, Rebecca played the good wife and was nice to me until our guests left on Sunday morning. When we waved goodbye to them, she said, "Don't be stupid enough to expect any favors from me." The next Thursday, the shit hit the fan when one of Rebecca's female co-workers called me at my job, and after a short introduction went straight to the problem. She said, "We have a new, very charming guy here at work, and there are 3 female co-workers who have been competing to seduce him, your wife, me, and one more single girl. Although we begged your wife to skip this since she's already married to a good man, she refused to listen to us. And now she is proud as hell and bragging about being the winner of our competition and going to the motel with him tomorrow after lunch." I thanked her and persuaded her to keep the call a secret so I could do something about our problem. Back home after the job, I watched Rebecca and got the feeling that she was slightly jollier than usual. After the phone call, I started thinking about what the old sergeant said during my Army service. He had been a great admirer of the Apache warriors in the old Arizona Territory and their tactics of surprise, hit, and then disappear. I had no experience with street fighting, so my only chance to win was to do just as those old warriors had done. Rebecca had bragged to me about the real man's black belt in some Japanese fighting sport, so the surprise element was very important. Pepper spray would have been great, but that is forbidden and not available in this country, so I had to find a simple alternative. A small plastic bottle with hair shampoo and water would be my weapon, and it worked well after a painful test in my own eyes. The sergeant told us a lot about how surprisingly effective the silent arrows with barbed heads from a well-hidden ambush had been at creating fear among soldiers during the frontier wars in Arizona. Of course, I could not use a bow and arrows against Rebecca's lover, but the idea got me to my small workshop in the basement. I took the closest thing that was available, a dart. By soldering 3 1-centimeter long pieces of sewing needles in small angles around the tip of the dart, I made a barbed tip. Hopefully, it would be difficult to remove some soft body parts without surgery in a hospital. There was no chance or interest in testing that weapon on myself. After some thinking, I had a simple plan without any need to buy complicated equipment for my action. Divorce papers given to Rebecca and her lover blinded for a few seconds would give me time to push the barbed dart into his bottom. I doubted that he would remain interested in sex with my 304 wife, at least not while he had that dart in his ass. The next morning, Rebecca dressed in a rather sexy dress, but I pretended not to see anything strange with that and avoided all comments. Both of us acted as usual on a Friday morning. At my job, I exchanged cars for the day with my fellow worker and good friend Eric. We did that often when he needed my Volvo V70 instead of his own smaller Peugeot 307. During the morning, I went to the courthouse for the divorce forms and filled one out at my office. After some searching, I succeeded in connecting to the main office for the AITA organization in Tanzania and got the email address for Rebecca's lover's wife there. Then I took off at lunchtime and went to Rebecca's job and found that both her and lover's car were still in the parking lot. Obviously, they had lunch at the nearby restaurant before going to the motel, so I bought a couple of hot dogs and went to the motel to wait for them. As you already know, the lovers came to the motel and my actions went just as planned. So my time in the army hadn't been totally wasted, and I felt grateful to the old sergeant there. At 3:30, my home phone rang, and the same female voice that told me yesterday about Rebecca going to the motel asked me, "Did you go to the motel today? And did you see what you expected to see? Thanks for calling." Yes, I went there, but your co-workers weren't happy to see me. I tried to cheer up my wife with some divorce papers, but that gift didn't make her happier. The man threatened to hit me, so I had to defend myself, and he got some damage to his bottom. I presume my wife must have taken him to the hospital. It was not much of a romantic date, at least not in my opinion. I told her, "Is that really true?" "Oh, yes, it is. I have no reason to lie to you. My wife isn't home yet, but feel free to call her cell phone and ask her. Of course, I can't guarantee that she will tell you the whole truth," I said. Then she, whoever she was, thanked me and asked for Rebecca's cell phone number, which I gave her. Hopefully they had a pleasant chat. After that, I sent an email to the real man's wife in Africa and explained the whole situation. Rebecca was back home already by 4 o'clock, and it was clearly visible that she wasn't happy at all. She stared at me and said, "We have to talk and do it now at once." No problem for me. You and your lover boy got what you wanted, and you had to have been totally insane if you expected me to be a poor idiot taking the humiliation you and your so-called real man intended to give me. No way, Rebecca, I'll never take such crap without fighting for my pride. I replied, though he had not done you any harm, you hurt him so badly that I had to take him to the emergency room at the hospital. Be sure you will have to pay for that. I told her, actually, we are 4 adults and 2 children sharing the bill for what you and that creep did. You can't be serious if you think that the poor nurse in Africa is happy after she received my email with the information about you and her husband. Now she knows what a shameless cheating creep she married and trusted. She shouted, "Did you really do such a nasty thing to his innocent wife?" Even threatening me with divorce was a very nasty thing to do. I haven't threatened you with anything. Just sign the divorce papers and you'll get fair terms to be a free woman in 6 months. Refusing to sign and going to a lawyer will cost you a lot, and you will still end up with the same terms in the end, I told her. Now she understood that I was serious and began sobbing. "Oh my God, are you really serious? Please listen to me for heaven's sake. I haven't done anything wrong." "Yes, you have. By joining your imbecilic mother's vendetta against me without any real reason, only because I don't have an upper-class name, you let her persuade you to be a nagging witch to me. You were in love with a coworker that you regard as my superior in all matters, based on what you have always told me. Then I found out that you have been competing with two single co-workers to get a date with this so-called real man. When you won that stupid game, you left the job early today, driving to a motel to collect your prize, and that meant cheating on me by screwing a married man. You know my opinion about cheating, so there can't be any doubt about these consequences. She continued sobbing. I didn't cheat on you, neither today nor ever before. That's for sure, and you are the only man I love. Have you forgotten that we have two children? What about them? Our children are the only reason that your nagging bum wasn't kicked out a long time ago. I've heard day in and day out about all my faults according to your mother's opinion, and from your own opinion of how damn worthless I'm compared to that defenseless creep of a real man you won, dated at the motel, and obviously love. I'm humiliated by your cheating attempt and fed up with all the other crap you were always throwing at me. After a while, she understood that the game was over, and we began to negotiate the divorce. Rebecca signed the papers after I had agreed that we both should continue living in our house and wouldn't date anybody else during those 6 months until the divorce was final. 6 weeks after my actions to stop Rebecca's cheating attempt. Strange things have happened in what is left of my marriage. I've discovered a good wife, a very good wife indeed. Rebecca has turned into a totally different woman who's obviously forgotten how completely worthless I was just a few weeks ago. Rebecca and I are polite to each other and doing much more together now than we did during the several months before our problems were out in the daylight. Of course, we are not sharing a bed or a bedroom any longer. To be honest, I don't miss those mercy quickies she gave me during those several months before her cheating attempt. It sounds silly, but I must believe her when she says she never had sex with her real man. The date at the motel was intended to be the beginning of their love story with some sex now and then. The real man's wife demanded that he come to Tanzania to work for free at the aid camp until her own contract expired. He went there to save his marriage, and his wife sent me an email saying that he is doing well and that she has forgiven him. She even begged me to forgive Rebecca, but I don't know what to do because we still have at least 20 weeks of thinking time left before our divorce is finalized. However, it will be interesting to see if Rebecca is serious with her good wife campaign and how long she might be able to go on with that. It may help if a certain dragon remains submerged in the depths of Loch Ness, Lake Champlain, or just in her nest.